Most often, I suspect this pops up with things like school, right? And we want our kids to work hard, right? You want your kids, we want our kids to work hard. But from our perspective, even more than wanting them to work hard, we would like them to want to work hard, right? And so really when you, in terms of psychology, we talk about an extrinsic locus of control versus an intrinsic locus of control. So the extrinsic is carrots and sticks, right? And we know that they work, to a point, right? If you threaten me with something terrible, there are all kinds of transgressions I might be willing to make if I thought something terrible was going to happen to my family. If you bribe me with ungodly sums of money, I might, again, maybe cross an ethical line. But the problem is there's no point in which that extrinsic motivation, the carrots and sticks, the threats and the bribes that so often are part of school, at no point in which those things transmogrify into intrinsic motivation. And if you get on that treadmill of external, then you have to stand on it all the time. You have to keep upping the bribe or upping the threat. And that's a terrible place to get into. And so we talk about in the book that parents so often care most about their kids being academically successful, which we do too. But from our perspective, the most important outcome of childhood and even more so adolescence is not perfect grades and perfect college admissions, but it's really the brain that you're going to carry into adulthood. And for us, developing and fostering, growing that intrinsic, that inner drive is just incredibly, incredibly important.
Great. And I'll add that in our book, we mentioned that until very recently, there was no emphasis at all in working with kids who have ADHD or learning disabilities or autism on anything other than kind of getting them to do stuff through rewards. There was no emphasis at all on the development of that intrinsic motivation, that sense of autonomy or sense of control. And the challenge is rewards undermine motivation. If kids enjoy drawing and you start to reward them for drawing, they lose their interest in it. And so because of that, we want to get out of that idea that our job, the most important thing is getting them to do stuff by bribing them. Now, I will say that years ago, I read about this study in which 4th and 6th graders were paid to go to bed an hour earlier or an hour later than normal. And the 6th graders were paid to go to bed an hour later. They couldn't stay up an hour later. They fell asleep on average about 35 minutes later than normal 3 nights in a row. And they performed like 4th graders on cognitive tests after losing this small amount of sleep for 3 nights. But the point is that I started to think, well, going to bed for teenagers, getting to bed at 10 o'clock is really hard. And so what I started to suggest is that let's say I don't want to bribe you, but if you think it's in your best interest to go to bed at 10 o'clock, I'm willing to offer you a reward, to make an incentive to make it easier for you to do that. And I personally think that's a nice way to think about rewards. Don't do it for me. I'm not trying to bribe you. But if this is something you want to do and it's really hard, I'm willing to offer an incentive for you. So that's why I think that rewards can be useful. But we wanted to do it in the kids of we want to use them in the service of a kid's goal, not basically just to get them to do stuff. Because just trying to get them to do stuff undermines intrinsic motivation.
So I can kind of relate to that as an adult because I can play tricks on myself. I can almost bribe myself at times or incentivize, I'll say, because I'm not really bribe, incentivize myself like, okay, what I'm going to do is I'm going to get this big project done and I'm going to go take a break and I'm going to go get an ice cream or something like that. Or I'm going to go
soak in the hot tub tonight.
Yeah, I create these incentives for myself. And what I hear you saying is there's nothing wrong with that. And in fact, in a way, that's like what we can kind of work with our kids on is they can build those incentives themselves. And we look at that as something different than a bribe. Is that right?
Right. And I think that Ned and I think the most useful thing to consider regarding motivation is you really can't motivate another person because you can't make somebody want what they don't want, And so I think that the challenge really is how do you help somebody find their own motivation? And that's what we're focused on in the first, in Self-Driven Child. We're thinking a lot about this issue for our second book that we're working on now, is how do we help kids find their own motivation for things? Because continually trying to make them do things, try to make them want what they don't want, or make them stop wanting what they want, like video games. It's just, we can't control other people. and making peace with that and learning more skillful ways of influencing kids is really powerful.
Yeah,
I agree completely. And I was going to add really quickly, Jason, your point is, I think, spot on, because if you think about, so often for us as adults, right, if we're trying to set a fitness goal, I want to get in more shape, maybe I want to lose weight or something, and we reward ourselves. If I do this, I'm going to buy this nifty pair of shoes, right? Or if I forgo, ice cream, if I don't have dessert all week, but I'll have a really good dessert on Saturday, right? So we figure out ways to motivate ourselves. But imagine if instead of that was a tool you were using for yourself. Imagine if Cecilia came to you and said, you know what, I'll tell you, if you'll lose 20 pounds, I'll buy you that really great jacket you wanted to. Oh my, that would totally change the energy, as opposed to you rewarding yourself, right? And so this goes back over and over to the sense of control that people feel in this. And we can vary, if done skillfully, we can use rewards for ourselves. But to echo Bill's point, I can use that to support a drive that I have, but we can't use it to become the drive, right? I have to be motivated to want to get in shape or to do well in school. And then you can support that, with these little incentives, as opposed to I'm only doing well in school to get those incentives. That energy changes in ways that are not where we want to be.